The stone that remembers. Marcus woke from the cold long before dawn. The barracks of the Ludus Magnus were always chilly in the morning, but today the cold felt different, as if the stone itself knew this day was unlike any other. Torchlight flickered through the gap beneath the door. Somewhere down the corridor, a guard's footsteps echoed. Marcus sat up on his straw mattress and looked at his hands, scarred, callous from the sword's hilt, yet still trembling, just as they had on his first day here, 3 years ago, when he'd been dragged in chains as a captive Gaul. Today was the day of the games, the very games for which Emperor Titus had ordered the completion of the greatest amphitheater the world had ever known. The Flavian Amphitheater, that was its official name, though the common people of Rome had already begun calling it something else, after the colossal statue of Nero that stood nearby. The Colosseum. Marcus had heard that 100,000 spectators were expected, that the games would last 100 days, that beasts had been brought from every corner of the empire, lions from Africa, elephants, bears from the distant north, even a rhinoceros, a creature no one in Rome had ever seen before. He wasn't thinking about the spectators, he was thinking about whether he would survive until sunset. The Gladiator school stood just steps from the amphitheater, connected by an underground tunnel dug specifically so fighters and animals could be delivered straight to the arena without passing through the crowds. Marcus walked through this tunnel in the half-dark, hearing, somewhere above, a growing rumble like thunder, the swelling roar of human voices. 100,000 throats. 100,000 hearts beating in anticipation of blood and spectacle. The lanista, the master of the school, walked beside him. "Today you fight not for me," he said quietly. "Today you fight for Rome. Remember that when the sword is at your throat." Marcus said nothing. He had long since learned that his master's words meant nothing down there, on the sand of the arena, where only one law decided anything, the law of steel. They climbed a narrow staircase and stopped before a wooden hatch. Above lay the hypogeum, an underground labyrinth spoken of in legend, cages of beasts, machinery for raising scenery, an entire hidden apparatus driving a spectacle the crowd above believed was magic. Marcus saw slaves hauling on ropes, heard lions snarling in cages to his right, smelled sweat, blood, fear, and the incense burned to mask the stench of death. "It is time," said the lanista. As the wooden platform beneath Marcus's feet began to rise, he felt as though the earth itself were pushing him upward, into the light. This was a special mechanism, a hypogeum, lifting fighters straight up from beneath the arena so they seemed to appear out of nowhere, to the crowd's delight. The light struck his eyes. Marcus squeezed them shut, and when he opened them again, he saw something he would never forget, however short the rest of his life might be. The oval arena, its floor covered in yellow sand, arena, the word that gave the arena its very name, and around it, rising tier upon tier, ever higher, people, thousands upon thousands of faces merging into a single living wall. Patricians in white togas in the front rows, closest to the arena, behind a low parapet fitted with netting to stop leaping predators. Above them, the equestrian class, higher still, ordinary citizens. And at the very top, beneath a wooden awning, women and slaves, for whom, even from up there, at the very summit, the spectacle was worth the climb. Above it all stretched the velarium, a massive canvas awning that a specially trained crew of sailors operated through a system of ropes and masts, shielding the spectators from the scorching Roman sun. Marcus thought, fleetingly, how much labor had gone into making it comfortable simply to watch people die. The crowd's roar crashed over him like a storm. Thousands of voices merged into a single wave of sound in which no individual word could be made out, but whose meaning was clear without words. They wanted a show. If Marcus's opponent that day was a Numidian named Juba, tall, powerfully built, a web of battle scars across his shoulders, they were led to opposite ends of the arena, and the editor of the games, a magistrate personally appointed by the emperor, raised his hand. At that moment, the noise fell away. 100,000 people held their breath at once. Marcus felt the entire world narrow to a single point. The gleam of Juba's sword, the look in his eyes, which held not hatred but the same resignation Marcus was certain showed in his own. Could he have seen himself from the outside? The hand dropped. The crowd roared. What happened next? Marcus could barely reconstruct afterward, the way a man who has survived a storm at sea remembers not individual waves but only the terror and chaos as a whole. The clang of steel on steel, officials shouting, the crowd's roar surging with each well-landed blow. Sand underfoot, sticky with blood, his own or his opponent's ass, he couldn't tell. Marcus was faster. Years of training in the Ludus had not been wasted. A strike, a duck, a feint, and Juba's blade whistled past his ear. A moment later, Marcus was behind him, blade at his throat. The crowd fell silent. By tradition, the fate of the defeated was decided not by the victor as well but by the will of the crowd, and, ultimately, by the game's editor. Juba, breathing hard, raised his left hand, appealing for mercy. Marcus stood over him, feeling his heart pound, his arms trembling from exertion. He looked up to where the noble spectators sat. Thousands of hands shot into the air. Marcus couldn't tell precisely what the gesture was. Thumb up, signaling mercy, or thumb down, demanding death. Historians, centuries later, would still argue over exactly what the gesture looked like, but the swell of voices resolved into a single word, recognizable even through the roar: Missio. Missio, let him live. The magistrate raised his hand, confirming the crowd's will. Juba would live. Marcus lowered his sword and extended a hand to the fallen man, helping him rise. In that moment, brief, almost imperceptible amid the general jubilation, something like brotherhood passed between two men who, minutes before, had been trying to kill each other. Both knew the price of this arena. Both understood that on another day, their roles might have been reversed. The games continued until sunset. Marcus, excused from further fighting that day, sat in the shadow of the hypogeum, watching through the grating of the hatch as events unfolded above. He saw the arena flooded for a naumachiae, a staged naval battle, in which miniature ships reenacted famous battles of the past. He heard the crowd's ecstatic roar when the beasts were released: lions, bears, and that same rhinoceros, strange and formidable, unlike anything Rome had seen before. He thought about how this amphitheater, these stone vaults, these hundreds of thousands of tons of travertine, brick, and concrete, would likely stand long after any memory of him, Marcus the Gladiator from Gaul, had faded. He was right, though he had no way of knowing it. Nearly 2,000 years later, tourists from every corner of the world would stand beside these same walls, photographing the arches beneath which people just like him had once died and triumphed. By evening, as the sun began sinking behind Rome's hills and the Colosseum as shadow stretched across the whole forum, Marcus stood in the tunnel leading back to the barracks and turned for one last look at the arena. The sand had already been smoothed for tomorrow's fights. The blood had soaked in without a trace, the way, year after year, century after century, history itself would soak into this very stone. The Colosseum would not remember his name. It would not remember any of those 100,000 spectators, nor the lanista, nor the magistrate, nor even Emperor Titus himself. But it would remember something greater, the very essence of human nature, the hunger for spectacle, the fear of death, the fleeting brotherhood between enemies, a crowd's roar demanding, in turn, blood and mercy. 2,000 years from that day, not a single witness would remain. Only these walls would remain, worn by time, plundered by medieval builders, stripped for stone to raise new palaces and churches, yet still standing. A silent witness to what people are capable of, in cruelty and in greatness. A stone that remembers what everyone else has forgotten. The end.